point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and the astonishing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. Every day I get up and go straight to work finding information about climate change and renewable energy and so forth, all kinds of energy on the internet. And I put together, for each article I find that's interesting to me, I put together a 50-word or so synopsis, a link to the original. 10 to 15 of these get packaged together every day, and they go up at a blog called geoharvey.com. You can visit that and click on the calendar on the date of a program if you're interested in it, and it will take you to a short list, 10 to 15 articles that you can look through for that program. We'll try to keep you apprised of the dates of the program so that you can get to them easily. This is the 305th edition of Energy Week.
I think it is.
It is indeed. And we're recording it on the 21st of February 2019. It starts on the 14th, a week ago today.
Well, I usually interject around here that some of these things are very interesting and informative, and we can only touch base on a few of them, you
yes.
know, or a little bit of each. So I'll try and alert you to some of the better ones so you can look them up on your own, because some of them are well worth looking up.
Some of them are. Yes, indeed. Should we get going here?
I think we ought to get started, yeah. We got a picture coming up here.
14th of February. This is a picture of the start of a snowstorm. What do you have for a title for this?
The Myth of the 24/7, 365 Power Plant. And I'm looking at that picture there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's New York.
No, I think I think that's Portland, Oregon. I'm not sure.
I have no idea, but it does. The street lights, the traffic lights don't look right for New York.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a downtown, and there is what's that? Fidelity. Fidelity Bank is there. So.
Yeah. The polar vortex caused a nuclear reactor to shut down, drove many coal plants offline, and contributed to a fire at a natural gas facility. Ironically, the owners of coal and nuclear plants are arguing for a government bailout because their supposed resilience in times of extreme weather.
Well, you know, they're looking to feather their own nest, I suppose you'd say. But no source of electricity runs full time. Nothing, okay? Wind and solar plants have failure rates, lower failure rates than fossil plants, but they still have failure rates.
Yeah,
and they all periodically need to be turned off for maintenance. So,
yes.
So nothing's 24/7, 365.
No, nothing is. And you know, if you look at that idea of baseload power, you don't have to go very far before you realize that we cannot run on baseload power alone. It just cannot be done because baseload power plants can't match demand. And if the demand is too high, then they have to reduce the demand somehow.
Well, the demand is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Okay, it depends on the weather, depends on a bunch of things.
Sure does.
And there are ways to deal with the demand, one of which, of course, is peaking plants. But now what seems to be happening is people are finding out that renewables fit the job very well.
Yes, yes. And the plants, as you said, you know, they all have to go down for maintenance. Nuclear plants, which have got the highest capacity factor, which means the greatest amount of the time they are producing the greatest amount of power on the that they can on the grid. 90% is a pretty good rate. That's what they have.
But when they're down, they're usually down for a long time.
They're down for a month because they're being refueled, and you know, you just can't get around that. And coal burning power plants don't have to be refueled the way that nuclear plants do once every other year or every 18 months. But
they've got their problems.
they've got their problems, and their capacity factor is around 80%. Peaking plants have capacity factors that sometimes are around 6 or 8%. They're almost always off.
Almost always off, and when they are on, they're very expensive to run.
Expensive to run.
Well, we're in the midst of a sea change here.
Yeah.
We're going away from fossil fuels and moving towards renewables. The renewables are a good idea, but let's face it, they're cheaper.
Yes.
That's what's gonna determine in the future.
That article, by the way, is excuse me, from the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Okay, we got another one coming up.
From Clean Technica.
The mayor of Los Angeles credits the Green New Deal for a decision to cancel 3 gas-fired generating stations.
Mayor Eric Garcetti spoke about the decision to cancel 3 new gas-fired plants. He said, this is a quote, "Now is the time to start the beginning of the end of natural gas. This is the Green New Deal, not in concept, not in the future, but now," end quote.
Well, a couple of takeaways from this. This is directly from the article. Coal is a dead man walking in the electricity generating business.
Yeah, boy, is it ever.
Okay. Many believe natural gas is the next thing to replace coal. It's true that it burns cleaner than coal, but both kill people with their emissions.
Yeah, isn't that lovely? And natural gas, the cheapest natural gas plants are far more expensive than solar and wind now.
Well, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
I saw FERC had come up with its projections of closures that they had for coal burning plants.
Yeah.
And I saw the same day that I saw that, I saw 3 rather old coal burning plants were going to be closed down in addition to the ones they knew about. And when you took the ones they know about over the next 2 years and the ones that have been added, the electricity generated by coal in the United States will fall by the end of 2020 to about 19.9%.
Well, it's a new model.
It is.
I mean, what we had worked well for a long time.
Coal
But its
produced,
day is over.
yeah, it produced 70% of our power at one time, I believe. Okay.
Okay, we got a picture coming up
We
here.
do indeed. We have a picture of wind turbines. That last article, by the way, was from Clean Technica, and this one is from
Renews. Okay. There's a nice little windmill.
Yep.
Next Era team unveils a 400 megawatt hybrid giant.
This has been all over the news for days and days. Everybody wants to publish an article about this. Next Era Energy Resources and Portland General Electric Company are developing a wind, solar, and energy storage hybrid project in Oregon. The Wheatridge Renewable Energy Facility in eastern Oregon will include 300 megawatts of wind power, 50 megawatts of solar, and 50 megawatts of storage.
Well, they're referring to it as hybrid because it's solar plus storage.
Yes.
It's 2 different concepts,
Yeah.
which blend well with each other.
Yeah, the wind, as you've pointed out, blows when the sun isn't shining. It blows more than when the sun is shining, and the sun.
Well, you get wind a lot at night.
You get a lot of wind at night.
Don't get too much solar at night.
Not at night. And then you get a lot of wind in the winter compared to.
Pardon?
You get a lot of wind in the winter compared to summer.
Yeah, you do.
Solar power is very closely matched through daylight hours to demand. That solar power ramps up as human activity in the daytime ramps up and continues until the sun goes down, and then after that you have to do something. So they put up battery storage.
Well, it makes sense.
This
It does make
combination is going to be.
Some sort of storage. Batteries right now seem to be the best bet.
Yep.
They've experimented with some wacko things. I mean,
That
trains
works.
running uphill.
Yeah.
What's
Compressed
that
air.
other one with the crane picking up
Yeah,
large weights?
Large weights, yeah, with a crane
Yeah.
that form a tower.
Yeah.
That you can, yeah, and those all putting weights in mines, putting water in mines, putting compressed air in mines.
Pump storage.
Pumped storage.
It's been around a long time.
Flywheels. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to store power.
Yeah, you know, there was a flywheel right in western Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Right across the line in New York.
Yeah. Another way to do it is to store it chemically, not in batteries, but by, for example, breaking down
Making hydrogen.
water to make hydrogen.
We're going to be talking about that later.
Right. Okay, our next item. What is our next item?
This is on from Friday, February 15th.
And this is from the Sydney Morning Herald.
Renewables will be the main source of global energy by 2040. And that's being said by British Petroleum.
Yep. BP says renewable energy will be the world's main source of power within 20 years. The pace at which renewable energy penetrates the global energy system is faster than for any fuel in history, BP said in its latest annual Energy Outlook report. And I happen to think...
Now, this is BP. P stands for petroleum.
Yeah. I happen to think that BP is wrong. It's not going to be 20 years.
It's going to be sooner.
Much sooner. Yeah. They're talking about half of the energy being from renewables by 2040. And I'm going to tell you, I think half the energy will be from renewables by 2030.
I put more money on your choice than on BP's choice right now. Well, according to the article, there will be a massive boom in demand and more generation will be needed to supply it. Now, they're talking worldwide here. They're talking global.
Yes.
The increase in energy over and above the evolving transition scenario is roughly, this is interesting, roughly the equivalent of China's entire energy consumption in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
The times they are changing.
Yeah, but you know, there's one thing about this that I find very irksome. And that is because of the current administration's policies, the United States is not taking a leadership role in this. The leadership role has been passed to China.
Unfortunately for the United States.
Right. And our leadership in the world, when we dropped out of the Paris Climate Accords, we were basically saying we don't want to engage. We want to be separated. And you cannot
America first.
America first, yes. You cannot be a world leader by being disengaged with the rest of the world. It won't work.
A little interesting takeaway from the article. Renewable power in Australia now accounts for a fifth of all energy generated.
A fifth in California.
In Australia.
Oh, in Australia. Yes. Okay.
We got a picture coming up.
We have a picture coming up? Yes, we do. Indeed. This is a net zero home in Arizona. It looks pretty normal. Well, it looks...
Well, you can see the panels on the roof.
On the roofs. Yeah, it looks normal for Arizona. I wouldn't expect a house like that to appear in Vermont. Nevertheless...
California leads in net zero homes as costs drop.
This is from Clean Technica. Half a dozen California cities are hosting enough net zero homes to place the state in first place in a trend that is catching on rapidly across the nation. It is expected to accelerate over the coming decade as the cost of adding net zero features, including solar, drops by 50%. And you know, California is making this an official policy now.
Is what?
Making this an official policy.
Yeah, they are.
They are taking on the idea of net zero or zero carbon emissions or whatever as a policy for all buildings.
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, there's a quick takeaway here. The premium cost of making a new home net zero is currently about 7.5%. That's not bad.
No, it's not.
Not at all. Under new California legislation, new residential buildings must include solar panels.
Yes.
And must produce more energy than they use by 2020.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, and
The
by
times
the way,
they are changing.
2 years ago, I've mentioned this before, 3 years ago perhaps, I interviewed for Green Energy Times an architect in Brooklyn who told me it is, if you build a building to be 90% of the way to passive, which means that you're basically cutting the energy consumption by 90%, the cost is the same and as a conventional structure. And
So that 7.5% is exaggerated.
No, this is for net zero, which means you've gone 100%. So you're going a little further than what this guy is talking about. But the point is that to cut your utility, your heating and so forth bills by 90% costs you nothing. if
and you
if you are
continue
building
to
a
save
house,
money
yeah,
forever.
you can, yeah. If you're building a house and the choice is do a conventional structure or a 90% of the way to net zero, and I talked to several different people about that who were contractors and architects, and they agreed. And one of them said he had recently had a client, and he said to the client, "Look, there's two ways we can go with this building. One of them is conventional. The other is almost net zero." And the person said, "Well, I don't want to do this fancy green stuff." And the architect who told him this said, "Okay, you don't have to, but I want you to know in advance it's going to cost you $3,500 extra to do conventional."
No kidding.
And so it's like you have to pay $3,500 more, and then in addition to that, you have to pay for heating
For
your
your
house.
fuel and all of that. Yeah.
And you know, it's just it's very important that people understand what they're doing when everybody, not just the clients.
the times they are changing.
They are. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, again, this one's from Vermont Public Radio.
It sure is.
Renew nukes. Utilities use nuclear energy to help meet renewable energy goals. This is kind of strange, I think.
Yes, it is. There was an interesting article also today about that reflects on this. Vermont utilities are using nuclear power to meet renewable energy standards. This is happening under a law meant to encourage conversion from things that use fossil fuels to ones that run on electricity, such as moving from traditional cars to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're able, because of this, to say, "Oh, this is a nuclear power plant." Seabrook is the one that is used. That's a nuclear power plant. There's no emissions at that plant. Therefore, it fits our renewable energy goal standard.
They're kind of cheating a little bit, aren't they?
Yes, I think they are. Although you have to expect businesses to do that if it's legal to do it.
Well, that's an accounting dodge, really.
It is, yeah. Okay, we're up to Saturday, February 16th. And we have a picture here.
A picture of Chicago.
And that looks a whole lot like a picture we had a week or two ago, but it isn't. It happens that it was done by the same photographer.
Uh-huh.
But the other picture that we had of the shore lakefront in Chicago had a very clear sky, and it was not in this location. It was looking down the beach, but it's very reminiscent. And this is from PV Magazine USA.
The nuclear city, which is Chicago, goes 100% renewable.
There are 11 nuclear reactors operating in Illinois, but Chicago is moving to renewable energy. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel unveiled the Resilient Chicago plan, which commits the city to, quote, transition to 100% clean renewable energy in buildings community-wide by 2035, end quote.
Well, according to this article, Chicago may be the largest city in the nation to commit to 100% renewable energy.
Yep.
Now, that does not include nuclear in this particular case.
Yes, it doesn't include nuclear.
Among the 50 action points in the report, well, okay. Chicago plans to complete the electrification of its bus fleet by 2040.
I think it
And
could
the
do it
city's
much
also
faster.
making a push for community solar.
I think about China as a
And the
third
buses.
world country
Yeah.
where people go out in rice paddies, and every bus in Shenzhen, which is one of the biggest cities in China and is I think as big as New York City, every single bus over
It's electrical.
16,000 of them is electric, and that's only happened in 3 years. So why is it taking Chicago 22 years to do that job? Or you said 2030.
Will.
Okay, 12 years.
Yeah.
It's because Americans are backward? I don't think so. I think it's just because there isn't the willpower to do it.
That's what I said, will.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
will. Okay.
That's exactly what I
Right,
meant.
that's what it is. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, let's move along here. This is from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And it says House Republican committee leaders begin caving in on climate science and policy. This is interesting.
Ranking Republican members of 2 U.S. House committees with the most jurisdiction over climate science and energy rationing policy sent strong signals that they want to support, quote, reasonable, end quote, measures to deal with climate change.
So this is the feds we're talking about.
This is
the government.
Yeah, this is the members of the U.S. House of Representatives. And by the way, today in the news, Donald Trump is apparently forming a White House committee to study the security implications of climate change.
Oh?
Yeah, and he's
got a hidden agenda or something.
He is apparently, according to, I think it was the Washington Post, about to appoint to that committee as its head a person who likened the work on trying to get coal out of use in the United States to the Nazi attitude toward Jews.
Wow, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, it's bizarre what's going on. Okay, should we hover over this one or go?
Well,
to
there's I don't think you even read it.
Didn't I read it?
I didn't read the title.
Oh.
House Republican committee leaders begin caving in on climate science and policy.
I read this.
Did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Duh.
I said, quote, reasonable, I remember.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a quote from the article.
Yeah.
Climate change is real.
By golly. What
and
an
as
amazing
Republican
thing to
leaders
discover.
of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, we are focused on solutions. True to form, the CEI, which is the Competitive Enterprise Institute, counters with many Republican members have aggressively challenged the phony climate consensus. Some people give up slowly, don't
I guess they do. Well, you know what's going to happen is they're going to continue giving up slowly until they get really, really scared by something.
Yeah,
and
something like
when that
that
happens, it's going to mean that people are starting to hurt, and they're not going to stop hurting until this ride is over, and this ride is going to keep going for quite a while.
I think so. Well, we got an interesting picture coming up.
We do. And this
let's
is
take a look at it.
article from the Sydney Morning Herald.
In case nobody's figured that out, that's the sun.
Yeah.
Plans for first Chinese solar power station in space is revealed. This is interesting.
It is. Scientists in China revealed plans to build the first solar power station in space. A solar power station orbiting at 36,000 kilometers would tap the energy of the sun's rays without interfering with the atmosphere. Seasonal or nighttime loss of sunshine, according to Chinese media. In other words, this is going to be orbiting in an orbit where it never gets into the shadow of the Earth, which is not difficult to do.
Well, this is kind of futuristic.
It is kind of futuristic.
They're talking about the possibility of generating all the power Earth needs from space.
Yeah.
I mean, they're getting that, I don't think we're going to see it.
I don't think they're going to put wind turbines on the moon, but they could put solar panels up.
They very well might. A solar power station held the promise of providing an inexhaustible source of clean energy for humans.
Yep.
It could reliably supply energy at 6 times the intensity of solar farms on Earth.
Yeah.
So this could happen. I mean, it's in the future, but it could
It'll
happen.
be interesting to see whether it does. The fact is, it isn't really necessary, but it would mean that we could use land on Earth for things other than transmission towers.
Well, and we don't even have any idea what costs of this thing could be and the benefits.
There's another thing too, and apparently they can transmit that power, but are you really certain that it's going to be safe to do so?
Well, the article mentions that. Yeah. They're planning on using laser beams to transmit the power to the Earth.
Which means very.
But what happens if you get in the way?
What happens if you just happen to miss your spot and melt a big hole in the ground?
Yeah. Or if somebody's standing in that spot.
Yeah. It gives the China syndrome another name, another cause, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Huh?
Okay, we're up to Sunday, February 17th, and we've got an item from the Lewiston Sun-Journal.
That's Lewiston, Maine, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Debate over science of global warming is shifting smartly to dialogue about solutions. Well, that's good.
It goes along with the article that we were just talking about conservatives and Republicans starting to get interested. For the first time in many years, there are real reasons for optimism in the journey to address accelerating risks of climate change. the root causes for the changes we see today in the Congress likely stem from changes in the views of the citizens. Well, of course they do. And we've seen that in
they're talking about dialogue about solutions.
Yeah.
And basically that means what we must do now.
Yeah.
Okay, so at least they're talking about it.
Yes. Okay, we have a picture.
Yeah, we got another picture here coming.
This picture really kind of surprised me a little bit. This is from Nature World News.
This is Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah, it's Annapolis. And if you
Which
look
is on Chesapeake Bay.
in the background, you can see a boat on the street.
Well, yeah, it could be on a street. It could
It's
also
not
be
on a
in the
street.
ocean, in
This is
Chesapeake
Dock
Bay.
Street. And
Dock Street.
just
Okay, so
looks
it's
like
right
it.
on the...
It's on the docks. But it looks like it's in the street.
Looks like it's in the street.
Yeah. Okay, what do you got for a title?
What rising seas mean for local economies.
The evidence of climate change is not just present in the form of frequent flooding, according to a study published in the journal Science Advances. It is also revealed as financial price for businesses. The study detailed losses for downtown Annapolis, Maryland. Now, you know, it's funny. I don't think of Annapolis as being a seacoast community.
Well, it's on Chesapeake Bay.
It's on Chesapeake Bay, and it's quite a long ways from the Atlantic Ocean. But it's affected by tides anyway.
The tides are still there.
They're still there. Chesapeake Bay is huge. And, you know, it's got these big boats. It's got a harbor. And here is Dock Street. And the businesses in Dock Street get flooded out regularly now. This is something that happens regularly at high tide when the moon is full or the moon is new.
It's increased about 60% from 20 years ago.
And it's going to go up another foot in, what did they say, 10 years? I think.
Well, in the early 60s, Annapolis had about 4 high tide flooding days a year, back in the 1960s. 2017, it experienced 63 flooding days.
So it was 1 day out of 6.
Yeah.
And, you know, every time this happens, if you look at that picture.
Let's get the picture
Yeah.
back.
On the left of the picture, there's a woman in the water, and she's at a door, and there's a person kind of looking out of the door. If you look at the bottom of the door, you'll
There's
see
like sandbags or something.
there's sandbags in the door. Okay, that business probably doesn't have a cellar. It's too close to the ocean.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they're using those sandbags to limit the amount of water that's in the
store.
In the store. Every time that floods, they have to clean it out.
Yep.
That's a mess.
Well, it costs a lot of money.
It
Bottom
does.
line, it's costing a lot of money.
It's shutting the store down. That store can't be open while it's flooded. And, you know, they had an article in here about a hot dog stand. I don't think that's the hot dog stand, but the people who were selling hot dogs, you know, how many tourists are there in a touristy part of town when the area is flooded?
That's partly what this story is about.
Yeah.
How much money they're losing from tourism.
That's what it's about. And it's not just
And
Annapolis.
it's a significant amount of money.
It's a lot of money. And that is, yeah. Okay,
Okay, we're moving on to Clean Technica here.
we are indeed.
Fossil vehicle sales are officially now decreasing in China, Europe, and the U.S.
These are the three,
Boom!
three biggest, yeah, these are the three biggest vehicle markets in the world, China, Europe, and the United States. And the fossil fuel-based vehicles, sales of them are declining in all three of those markets. They're about even in the United States, but they're declining rather rapidly.
In China, they're very rapidly.
Yeah, and Europe. Meanwhile, EV sales are up. Okay, let me read this. Sales of fossil fuel vehicles are now on the decline in the world's 3 largest auto markets and being replaced by EVs. While overall light vehicle sales have been flat or declining, sales of EVs have been increasing rapidly in all 3 markets. And we're talking like 60% here.
Interesting takeaway here.
Yeah.
Since the 3 largest auto markets, okay, that's China, U.S., and Europe,
Yeah.
okay, are already seeing falling combustion vehicle sales, the internal combustion engine appears firmly headed for the dustbin of history.
Yeah, and you know, these auto companies are still coming up with new designs for them. It really makes me think, I wonder what's going on in their minds, or whether they have minds.
Well, according to this article, it's going to happen quickly.
Well, we've seen that kind of thing in the past. What's going to happen at some point is that these big, and I think it is already happening, but these big companies are going to say, oh, nobody wants these anymore. It's kind of like Chrysler saying, oh, nobody wants any convertibles anymore. We'll just stop selling them.
Yeah.
Well, if nobody wants, or if the sales are declining in internal combustion vehicles, they will stop selling them. And it just means that they have to get to that decision, and they have to stop advertising them, which of course will happen.
Well, there are changes coming that have to happen before this has to happen. And
Yeah.
that's the network of stations to service the electric vehicles.
Right.
That's not in place yet.
Yep. Okay. We are up to Monday, February 18th, and we have an item
I think
here
we are, yeah.
from Utility
We got
Magazine.
a picture here too.
And we have a picture of birds and
Some
wind
Boyds.
turbines. And that wind turbine, by the way, it might be half a mile away. The birds are much closer. And
So that wind turbine's not scaring the birds much, is
no,
it?
it's not.
Renewable energy set to power over half of Australia. Well, we kind of touched base on this a little earlier, but now we're hitting it again.
Yeah. The Clean Energy Council policy directives for the upcoming federal election say that over half of Australia's power should come from renewable energy sources by 2030. Okay? A national energy and climate policy is the missing link to allow a smooth transition. The Australians are putting in renewable energy so fast it's almost mind-boggling. And the federal
And they're
government...
doing it a lot on their own.
Yeah, and the federal government is discouraging them from doing that. And, they're going to...
We've talked about that. The federal government is not in touch with the people in
No,
Australia.
and if the people elect a new government, which I kind of suspect they will, the federal government is all of a sudden going to be... It's going to be like whiplash, It's going to be... this is what everybody wants, and all of a sudden the federal government wants it. And you're going to see some, I think, radical solutions being proposed.
Well, it's interesting. This Clean Energy Council has developed 10 recommendations.
Yes.
And they're short. I've abbreviated them a little bit.
Okay.
So we got time, I think, to mention them.
Yeah.
50% renewable energy by 2030.
Yes.
Now, that's basically what you've been saying already today.
Yes.
Develop Australia's electricity transmission network, which needs help.
Yes.
Okay, that does definitely need help.
Yeah.
Energy storage, such as batteries and pumped hydro.
Yes.
Yup. Maintain a small-scale renewable energy scheme, which they don't go into it, but it's a way of getting smaller people to go through renewable energy.
There are people all over Australia who need 100 miles of wire to get,
Yeah, 'cause it's
20 families.
small population, big country.
Yeah, that's right.
Mandate solar power in all new homes.
Yes.
Okay. Support innovation and finance technology and integration. Well, that goes with these other things.
Yep.
Develop a clean energy export strategy,
There's an important one.
because they're trying to export coal and people don't want it.
It's not going to last very
Support skills development to meet the needs of a growing industry.
long. Yes.
Establish a battery manufacturing and recycling industry, which apparently Australia doesn't have.
Yeah.
And develop a single national electrical safety body.
In other words, move into the future instead of into the past.
Well, basically, that's what this
And
is.
Donald
and,
Trump wants us to move back to 100 years ago, and he hasn't got the understanding that 90 years ago we went into the worst depression this country has ever had. But, I've read that he says he has an IQ of 203. And I want to tell him you cannot calculate an IQ by adding the IQs of the people who tell you what to think.
Well, coming back to Vermont now.
Yeah.
Encore Renewable Energy announces completion of a medical center solar rooftop.
Yep, this is from Renewable Energy magazine. Encore Renewable Energy announced the commissioning of a 198 kilowatt solar array. Which doesn't sound all that big, but the building it's going into is not all that big. On the roof of the University of Vermont Medical Center in Holly Court in Williston, Vermont. The project began generating electricity in December 2018 and has a 25-year life term.
Well, the article's got a picture of the building.
Yes.
And it looks like it's about half the size of our hospital.
Yes.
And virtually the entire roof is solar.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay.
Acting as developer, And as the engineering, procurement, and construction contractor, Encore is responsible for all development, design, permitting, and construction for the project as well as financing.
Yep.
So Encore Renewable is in this up to their necks.
Yep.
And I think it's a good investment.
I think so. Okay, we have a
And we
picture.
got another one coming up here. This is
and
an
we have
interesting
an article
picture.
from Clean Technica.
Now, that's a refugee camp for those that
I
Don't
don't know.
recognize
I
it.
don't know where that camp is.
I did notice. I did find out. We'll see if I can find.
It's
find
in
it from
some
here.
sunny country.
Well, it's in Africa.
Okay.
What energy deprivation really means in refugee camps.
There are a few places in the world where energy poverty is more rife than in refugee camps. About 80% of those who live in camps have absolutely minimal access to energy for cooking and heating.
I'm gonna put it back
About
up.
90% have no access to electricity, but renewable energy offers them hope. And you know,
They're cooking over wood and coal in
That-
their
in-
houses, and
yeah, well, this is a temporary structure they've put up in a refugee camp, and that looks like, I don't know, it doesn't look like a rocket stove.
a what?
Rocket stove. It's a rocket stove.
Oh
has a-
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't
I don't
think
think
so.
it's
I
a
think
rocket
it's
stove.
something more primitive.
Yeah, but you know, seeing this picture and reading articles like this makes me think that there is a way to deal with refugees to the United States and other places if you don't want them, and that is not building a wall, because building a wall. Did you know that the refugee problem peaked under George W. Bush?
Yeah.
And by the time Obama left office, it had declined by 75%.
Oh.
And it hasn't changed under Trump since Obama left office. So he wants to build a wall. And the wall isn't going to keep anybody out, because crossing that border is not where people are coming from, for the most part. The bulk of our illegal people in the United States are not crossing the
Not at the border crossing.
they're not at the border crossings. But nevertheless, if we could move other countries, the people in other countries, into a position where they were happy to be where they are, they would stay where they are. And it would
Well,
take
we've
very
been
little to do
interfering
that.
with other countries for all of my life.
Tom, I thought you were younger than 150.
Interesting takeaway from this article.
Yeah,
They're talking about people in these refugee camps
yes,
using renewable energy as ways to make a living.
yes,
Coming out of nowhere, there's one woman that's selling cold water.
yes.
How does she get cold water? She's got a refrigerator. Interesting. It's interesting.
Is it a fire-powered refrigerator?
They didn't go into that.
You know, I'm still amazed at these refrigerators that run on.
No, it's solar
propane.
panel. Solar panel
There you go.
fridge.
Okay. Okay, so should we go on? We're up to Tuesday, February 19th.
Yeah, giant wind power transmission project could spark a new wind rush in the wind belt.
Yep. Grain Belt Express is one of a group of ambitious wind power transmission projects under the umbrella of the company Clean Line Energy. The massive 700-mile wind project has been stalled, but it looks like it might be restarted.
Well, it looks like this project started, stalled. Now it's on the shelf, but according to this article, they're going to
Pull it out of the.
pull it out
Yeah.
of the air.
There's an interesting map on this. I didn't put the map into the list of images for this. Maybe I should have, but it shows basically the area in the central part of the United States where the wind energy is really very.
Basically, it's the entire central part of
Yeah,
America.
it's like
top to bottom.
Yeah, a quarter of the United States, and not that wind power is not good elsewhere. It's just that
There's a lot of it there.
There's a lot of it there. There's many times as much energy and wind in that part of the United States as the nation needs, for all things. We could, if we powered all of our vehicles from there, it would be You know, I keep thinking about the 747s flying across the sky with very long extension cords. But nevertheless, there's almost no transmission lines coming out of that area. They're all over the east part of the United States, and they're all over the western part of the United States, but they don't come out of that area of the United States. And, you know, that's one of the things that they need in order to make use of that. So, anyway, should we?
Yeah, we got another one coming up. Got another picture.
We have a picture.
I think we got a picture.
We do. Yep.
And there is that picture.
There's the picture.
And it says, should Lake Erie have legal rights?
This is from Clean Technica. On February 26th, voters in Toledo, Ohio, will be asked to approve the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, a ballot initiative that it would make it possible for citizens to sue those who pollute the lake for damages. The proposal is controversial, but passionately supported by environmental activists. Now,
Let's take a look at that picture again.
yes, let's do that. I wanted to mention Lake Erie is almost the same size as the state of Vermont.
That's about right.
It's pretty much the same size. And what we're seeing in this picture is approximately, very roughly, half of Lake Erie. And that green blob on the left there is an algal bloom. And I don't know what kind of algae it is. Some algae is pretty benign, and some of it is stinky, and some of it is toxic. And
Well, it's coming mostly from farm runoff.
yes,
And it's happening here in Vermont in Lake Champlain.
absolutely,
For
it
the
is.
very same reason.
Absolutely, it is. And that's
What's
one-
also interesting, if you're looking at that picture there, that green section is the algal bloom,
Yes.
or as a representation of it.
Yep.
That in itself is as big as Lake Champlain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's also I'm estimating it as being approximately, and I mean very approximately, the size of Windham County. But I would think if it's the size of Lake Champlain, then it's probably bigger than Windham County by a fair margin.
Well, I did check it against Lake Champlain on the map. It's about
okay.
the same
About the
size.
same
Just
size.
the algal bloom
Now,
is about the same size
One of the things
as
about
all of Lake Champlain.
Yep. One of the things about these algae, and this is true of the ones that come up in Lake Champlain, the blue-green algae, some of it, you can go to the co-op here in Brattleboro and buy blue-green algae to eat because it's good for you.
Yeah.
But that's just one species.
Yeah.
There are other species that are extremely toxic, and on top of everything else, boiling the water will not destroy the toxicity, because the thing that makes them toxic is the fact that they're putting poison into the water.
Uh-huh.
And you don't know unless you know. And so a bloom like that could make the entire lake toxic. Not that it hasn't been toxic from chemicals already. I mean, when I was in college, Lake Erie was called dead, and they said it would take 2,000 years for it to recover.
Well, a lot of it has recovered.
That's because they stopped
Yeah.
putting out DDT.
Interesting here, since the first colonists set foot in North America, the waterways have been used as little more than sewer pipes.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's going
And
on
you know
here.
what? If corporations can have rights, then lakes should have rights.
Well, I think that's the point in the article, really.
Yeah, okay. All right, we are up to another article from Clean Technica
Okay.
about universities.
21. New York universities form a renewable energy purchasing consortium.
21,
That's interesting.
Yeah, 21 universities in the state of New York banded together in the New York campus's Aggregate Renewable Energy Solutions Consortium. This is something that was put together as purposely in order to have a name that's long enough that you can't say it without stumbling, which seeks to lower financial barriers to renewable energy procurement through combined purchases. Now, basically what they're doing is what the city of Greenfield, Massachusetts did, and other cities around the United States. In Massachusetts, they have aggregate community aggregation. So a community can say, we're going to aggregate everybody except the ones who want to opt out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you can buy energy really, really inexpensively.
Well, that's what Greenfield is doing.
Greenfield is 100% renewable in its electric supply, and that saves money for the people who live there in their electric bills.
By the way, I noticed something interesting on this website.
Yes.
Using this website, you can buy an organic T-shirt.
Is it made out of hemp?
I didn't go into that.
Yeah.
I don't know what makes it organic.
Well, it's organic. If you talk to an organic chemist, he's going to tell you if it's got carbon in it, it's organic.
Well, it's the entire New York State University, plus about another half a dozen
Yeah.
colleges
Yeah.
in New York State.
In New York State, and that's a lot. You
Oh,
know,
it is.
It really is.
Yeah. They're all big colleges.
They're all
These-
big.
These are not small.
Well, you go to Dartmouth, for example, in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I think 50% of the people in Hanover are students.
Never
There's
gave that any thought.
A
but,
lot of
yeah.
there's a lot of. When my father went to Dartmouth, and he told me that there was a point where the city of Dartmouth decided they wanted to tax the students, and the one good way to do it was to make them all citizens.
Okay.
You know, if you're going to be there for long,
Yeah.
you have to be a citizen
Yeah.
of
And we can
Dartmouth,
tax you.
and then we can tax you. And so the students voted, took over the city government, and the first act that it had was to vote in a covered walk that would go to Smith College. Which is like, I don't know how many miles, but 100 miles or something. I think that's what they call an apocryphal story. But nevertheless, there it is.
Well, let's move up to
Okay,
Wednesday.
We are up to Wednesday, February 20th, and we start with an article from Gas World.
Renewable hydrogen bill approved.
This is really interesting to
It
me.
is. It is.
You know, the natural gas industry has got this segment in it that says, yeah, we need to be renewable. We don't have, it's not just that we have to beat carbon, we have to be zero emissions. How do you do that with natural gas? Well, these guys have got a way to do it. Hawkins renewable hydrogen bill approved by Senate. You just read that, didn't you? Or did I read it?
Well, I didn't
in
say
place?
Hawkins, but renewable hydrogen bill approved.
Okay. Public utility districts in the state of Washington could soon have the authority to produce and sell renewably generated hydrogen under a Senate-approved bill introduced by 12th District State Senator Brad Hawkins. The Senate bill, Senate of the state of Washington passed the bill by a vote of 47-0.
I guess it was pretty popular.
I,
This is an interesting
you think the
concept.
governor is going to veto it?
This is an interesting concept. These public utility districts plan to use electrolysis
Yes.
to produce hydrogen
Yes.
from the surplus energy that they are
Yes.
generating, which can be sold as a transportation fuel.
One of the problems with, you know, people say the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. This is really, when you get down into the nitty-gritty of analysis, it's utter nonsense. It's something that's true. It's intuitively obvious, but you know, it was intuitively obvious to Isabella that the world was flat. The fact is, the biggest problem with wind turbines is that they have to be adjusted to meet demand, which means that if the wind turbines are producing power and there isn't any demand for it, you turn the wind turbine 90 degrees so it stops producing. That way you don't have excess power.
Well, you're wasting the wind, though.
Yeah, you're wasting the wind. These guys are saying you don't have to do that. You could take that excess power and apply it to making things
Make
such
hydrogen.
as
Yeah.
hydrogen. So
Makes sense to me.
And the hydrogen can go into the natural gas pipes, and you can send it to people's homes, and the carbon footprint of natural gas goes down when you do that. It's really kind of okay.
Well, we got another picture coming
We
up.
do indeed, and an item from Utility Dive. The article here is about Texas. That
That's from Hawaii.
picture is from Hawaii, but it kind of applies to this.
It's a very large solar
It's a large
array.
solar array, and it has batteries, which I think are what you see
That's
there.
the white stuff. That's
The white
that's the
stuff.
storage.
And here I thought that was the zinc oxide dust.
Developer eyes world's largest solar plus storage facility for Texas. Well,
Renew-
Texas never does anything small.
Renewable energy developer Intersect Power floated plans to construct a 459 megawatt
It's
energy
actually
storage.
495.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Next to 495 megawatts of solar power in Borden County, Texas, according to the January Generation Interconnection Status Report from the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And you know, one of the interesting things about it is that a lot of this power is going to be what powers I forget whether it was a refinery or it was something that had to do with fossil fuels that they were going to be powering this stuff.
Well, yeah, the facility is in the middle of what they call the Permian Basin in Texas.
That's
and
right.
New
It's the
Mexico.
Permian Basin they're going to be powering.
And the Permian Basin is all this shale rock that's just loaded with oil and gas, but you got to frack it.
Yeah.
So this is going to pay for a lot of that cost of getting that stuff
In
out
other
of the
words, they're
ground.
using renewable energy to get their fossil fuels.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, should we go on, or is there more on that?
Well, the Permian Basin produces about a quarter of all U.S. oil, so this is significant.
Right. Right. Okay. And our last
is the last
story
item.
is from Madison.com.
Conservative group urges Wisconsin lawmakers to embrace renewable energy. This is interesting.
As the cost of wind and solar power continues to fall, a new organization is pushing Republican-controlled Wisconsin legislature to embrace renewable energy and begin working on policies to address a rapidly changing marketplace.
Well, it's an interesting twist. It's the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, and they are still supporting nuclear and natural gas, but they're pushing renewables.
Yeah. And
Because it makes sense.
yes. There was an article today about at Clean Technica from Michael Barnard, who is a really interesting writer. He's very into numbers, and I'm very into numbers, so I relate to his articles easily. And he said, if you go to solar power or wind power as opposed to nuclear power to address climate change, you're going to get 3 times as much, and you're going to get it at a lower cost by avoiding nuclear.
The times they are changing.
Well, nuclear power is extremely expensive. The fact is that I've mentioned Wright's law a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
As you get familiar with new technology, the cost of that technology goes down.
Sure.
And the rate at which the change happens is related
Rapid.
to how quickly you're getting into the new technology. So if you double your installations of new technology, if you double the amount of solar power that's installed, you have a decline in the cost of solar power, which is probably going to be equal to the decline that you get when you double it again. So for every double, it's like Moore's law,
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that if you go through this and you investigate it statistically, you find out that with new technologies, this is just true. It almost every new technology. It's going to be true for carbon capture for coal, except the carbon capture is a tiny portion of the cost of the coal plant. So if the other costs of the coal plant go up, it's not going to alleviate that.
I got a solution for that, by the way.
Yeah, what's that?
Everybody eat oysters.
How does that solve it?
Well, the oysters have shells,
Yes,
and the shells are calcium carbonate.
there you go. Absolutely. The more oysters we have in the world, the less carbon dioxide we're going to
Bingo.
have in the
Yep,
atmosphere.
yep.
There you go. Well, the cost of renewable energy has been going down, but the point is the cost of renewable energy will continue to go down.
And the cost of nuclear is not going down.
Not going down, it's going up.
Mm-hmm.
And the same is true of coal and natural gas. And what we've seen in the last year or the last 2 years, and we've been talking about this for a long time, is that the cost of renewable energy is getting to the point where renewable energy is so competitive with fossil fuels that the fossil fuels cannot survive. Well, we're at a point now where we are beyond the point where those cross.
Kind of looks like it, doesn't it?
And for the future, it just means that natural gas is going to be a worse and worse and worse alternative for investment.
Well, they're running out of that too.
Yes.
I mean, right now there's a surplus because of fracking, but they're not finding new sources of natural gas like they'd hoped they would.
They're not. And, we had a big year for natural gas plants last year. 2/3 of the electric generating facilities put in terms of capacity with natural gas. But I think in the next 2 years, according to FERC, natural gas only accounts for something like 20% of the applications for installation. The rest of it is almost entirely made up of, well, it is actually almost 100% of the rest is renewable energy.
Well, we're in the middle of a sea change and really not even noticing it. I mean, it's happening.
But you know, Tom, have you ever watched the tide change?
Well, sort of. I was a lifeguard for 3 years.
Yeah. Anybody who doesn't understand this, it might be worthwhile to watch the tide change. The tide comes in, the tide comes in, the tide comes in.
Little by little by little.
Yeah, and then it goes out. Well, what happens in the middle? How do you know that the tide is changing? When it's coming in, it's moving in one direction. When it's going out, it's moving the other. But how do you know that it's at a point where it's changing?
The only way to know it is the marks in the sand.
No.
How?
You can tell because there's no motion. The ocean isn't moving in either direction.
Oh, for a very brief period of time.
For a very brief period of time.
Yeah.
So you look at what's going on in the world today and you say, or a year ago, people were saying, I don't see any change. Well, that's the change.
Yeah.
And now, worldwide, we're seeing huge amounts of renewable energy being put in all over the world. We're not seeing huge amounts of coal and natural gas.
Well, way back in the early days of electricity, back in the days of Edison and Tesla,
Yeah,
they wanted electricity in New York City.
yeah,
They brought it all the way down from Niagara Falls,
right.
which in those days was a massive project.
It was a feat.
Now, in the future, is going to be distributed generation all over the place.
Which means we've got a different paradigm.
Absolutely.
And that means big companies, big companies, have got to figure out how to change their business plans
yeah.
to meet that. And that's a big problem. So
It doesn't lend itself well to a solution. I mean,
some of
big
them,
companies distributed all over the place.
Yeah.
Small companies distributed all over the place. I think the small companies are going to win.
Yes, and you know, people like Bill Gates, for example, I don't think he really understands that at all. He's talking about how nuclear plant, we need nuclear. I don't think he understands, and he should, because he almost oversaw the revolution in computers, but he built a big industry, and he understands.
Apparently not seeing the parallels.
No, I don't think he is, and you know, but his business is no longer as dominant as it once was. I don't use, well, I'm using Windows operating systems for these two computers, but I only use these two computers for this show.
Okay.
The other computers that I've got are all
You use Linux.
they're all using Linux, and as a matter of fact, in here I've got a smartphone. There it is. I've got a smartphone, and the smartphone, which I was off, by the way, because it's carcinogenic when it's on.
Yeah.
The smartphone uses an operating system called Android. Linux comes from Unix. Android comes from Unix. You know, you can go down the list of various operating systems that come from Unix.
Okay.
And in fact, MS-DOS originally was kind of based on Unix, sort of.
Uh-huh.
But these things, operating systems, are free.
Yeah.
And
Open source.
I've got computers that cost $5, and they're 1,000 times as powerful as my original IBM PC, and they run software that is free. And you know, the world is changing here, and it's not just computers; it's the whole world of energy. So there you have it.
Well, it's been an interesting show.
I've had fun, and we hope all of you have too.
Take it easy, people.
See you next week.